Welcome to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for Today's World, the podcast that helps parents of teens find connection, clarity, and confidence. I am Cheryl Pankhurst, a parenting coach and advocate who believes that it's not about changing our kids, it's about transforming the way we show up for them. Together, we will explore real tools, heartfelt stories so you can parent with purpose, stay aligned with your values, build and rebuild trust, even in the toughest teen years. And today I am honored to welcome my returning guest, Richard R. Ramos, a man whose journey from surviving gangs, drugs, and violence to becoming a nationally recognized leader in youth violence prevention is nothing short of inspiring. Richard is the author of From the Margins to the Mainstream and Parents on a Mission, powerful books that help parents with the competition for their children's hearts, minds, and loyalty. He's also the founder of the groundbreaking Parents on a Mission and Youth on a Mission programs, where they are transforming families and communities across the country. And now, the release of his latest book, The Art of Step Parenting, How to Blend Families Without Tearing Them Apart. Richard is bringing hope and practical tools to step parents and blended families everywhere. Welcome, Richard. It is such a privilege to have you back with me.
It's nice to see you again, Cheryl. Thanks for having me again.
And this is great because I want to know, I've done podcast after podcast about co-parenting but never really dove into the step parenting. And I think this is such an important topic. And I think, there are lines that are crossed that don't need to be crossed, and roles that I think sometimes are overstepped and maybe understepped in these relationships. And so I would love to know first from you, why the book?
Well, I've been a step parent all my parenting life, Cheryl, and from day one. And my stepson is now 50 years old. So I've raised him. He's a tremendous young man. And so I'm happy to celebrate that. But also I learned a lot of things along the way, a lot of mistakes that I made. Unfortunately, I have 4 other children, and unfortunately, the mother of my children passed away many years ago. So I have single parent experience as well. But currently now, my wife and I, we've been married for 23 years, and we now have a blended family of 8 children. They're all adults. We have 11 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
So why the book is because I just wanted, number one, I just feel there's a real need to speak maybe in some unconventional ways to this issue. And also, I just wanted to add my voice. I know there's other books out there. When I did my research, there's a lot of books out there. So I just wanted to add my voice and my perspective. And third, over my career of doing Parents on a Mission and working with all the families, most of them are, they have these issues. They're divorced parents, single parents, blended families for the second or third time, things like that. And so it's a very, I'm calling it the norm now in America. I think one of the statistics was that 1 in 3, I forget if it was 1 in 3 Americans or 1 in 3 children in America will be part of either a step family or a blended family. So I felt it was important to talk about it.
I love that. And there's lots of podcasts out there too. And, so I understand what you're saying. There's always I think people hear things differently from different voices or different, perspectives. And the more information and the more awareness that's out there from everybody, I think is so important, because this is, this could make or break.
That's right.
Totally make or break. And so I want to ask you first, because I almost want to go linear for a second. So if you have you're in an intimate relationship, 2 parents, or 1 parent, 1 not a parent, I guess, and you are deeply in love and really want to blend your family, what would be your first steps to think about, to talk about, to take before it even becomes something?
Well, and that's, what being a human being is so challenging, because our emotions are powerful. Let's face it, they're just, they drive a lot of our decisions. And that's why emotional maturity and these teachings, on emotional intelligence are so important, to recognize, how do we make choices? Because those choices, affect not only ourselves, but a lot of other people. And in this case, it would be affecting the children. But, when you, as you mentioned, being in love, that emotion, I know for me, it drove me to make a decision of instant family. What did I know about being a dad? Nothing. I was 20 something years, 23 years old or something like that. And she had a child. So I think now, looking back, of course, I think if I would have waited a little bit more and thought about, hey, the in-laws, the ex-spouse, I really wasn't thinking about any of that. I just was in love, and so to me, that justifies it all, but it doesn't, because now this child's involved in the relationship. So I think, yes, it's easy for me to say now, think about it, really count the cost and take a step back and think about, it's not, you are not just marrying this other person. You're marrying a whole tribe of people. And that's true in any marriage, but this is a little different in that it's not just her mom and dad and brothers and sisters. It's the in-laws that are tied to that child, who want to be in their life, let alone the spouse, and let alone if that was a toxic divorce, and then there's anger, and now all of a sudden you got to deal with that. And are you ready for that? Do you want that? And it's lifelong. It's not like it does change, but so yeah, those are things that I would encourage. But I also understand sometimes people are just go with the emotion. Oh, it'll all work out. It doesn't always all work out.
No. And I'll be completely honest here. After my marriage ended, I jumped into a relationship pretty quickly, and I had 2 kids and he had a daughter, and I was like that. Oh, I'm going to be happy. They're going to be happy. They're going to see what a good relationship is like, and everything's going to be, oh my God, listen, nope, and nope. I wish I had heard this podcast 25 years ago.
Me too.
Because, there was so much retraction happening, where I thought the kids were fine and they were not happy being in this house, and they were not happy with the move. And it was very quick for that. It was and I was in love, but it was incredibly insensitive of me. And if I could go back, Richard, I would go back and do things very, very differently. So that's really the point of this too. We don't just have podcasts because everybody did something right. No. We're doing this because here's the path I took. Let me help you miss the landmines a little bit.
That's right.
Because it's, like you said, it's not just you and her, or you and him, or him and him, whatever. There are these people we brought into the world.
That's right.
And I think to remember that when we have kids, it's almost this invisible contract or promise, like we're just going to be this happy family forever. And then, things fall apart as they do. And now maybe it's great for us to be away from that relationship and out of that marriage, but they'll never agree with that.
That's right.
And so now you're going, here you go. So let's talk about how we start these conversations then, even with each other, with the kids, and we'll keep it, teenage. Like I think it's different conversations when you've got 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, but how about teenagers?
Well, yeah, when the kids are little, it's much easier for them to both adapt to you and to the situation and everything, because they don't understand what's going on. Of course, later on, what's going to matter later on is what you did in between the time you started and the time they get to the point where they start to really get it. But as far as jumping into the second marriage with my current wife, her kids were, well, the youngest, who was only 4 or 5 years old, but the other two were teen and preteen. And so they weren't having any of it, and although I tried to have a man to man, man to boy, male to male conversation, they just didn't want to hear it, so that's the reality of it. But my suggestion is to try anyway, to try to have that conversation again, to understand I'm not trying to be your dad. Your mom and I really like each other, and we're thinking about getting together, and we just want to hear from you what you have to say, even though we may not agree, and I think that kind of honesty is important, because as you said, they're not going to like it, but at least if you're being upfront and you're being honest and like age appropriate in what you say, then I think that pays dividends down the road. Initially, it's not gonna, and I wouldn't even try at that time to convince them. That would be a huge mistake, to convince or argue for why you should accept this, relationship. That's not the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation is to make them feel heard and understood.
So let's play this out. Okay, 13-year-old potential stepson says, no, I don't want this. I hate this. I'm never doing this. I'm just going to go live with my other parent. That's it. I hate this. I hate you. Now what?
Yeah. So at that point, that's where so in this case, it's if that was being said to me and it's his mom, his mom is the woman, that would be, really bottom line up to her, because I might still want to move forward anyway, but she might just say, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, but my son, my kids are it's too much. It's too important. I don't want to go down that road. And I think right there and then she may make that decision. And then that's something that we have to accept. Yeah. However, that could also be a temporary situation. It could a decision, where she said, look, let's just not do this right now. Mm-hmm. Let's let time pass. Maybe you and I can have some dates and some conversation, because maybe my son can accept at least that, okay, he's not moving in, we're not getting married, but, son, I don't want to be alone the rest of my life. I'm going to, I'm not going to lie to you and sneak around. That kind of honest conversation, I think, is important.
Well, and now he feels heard and he feels seen. And yes, maybe we can revisit it later down the road. And also, if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, our kids are not with us forever. So if it means you have to date for 5 or 6 years, well, you have to date for 5 or 6 years. If it means, having that relationship with your kids. I'm a strong believer in when you are married to someone who isn't the parent of your kids come first. That role switches for me. And because they were there first. Mm-hmm. And so I like your answer. Like, maybe we put it on hold. Maybe it just doesn't move forward right now. It doesn't mean you can't have a life, but when you think about, if you talk to people who went ahead and made that decision anyway, don't ask them if you're not going to give a shit what they say. Right. That's not the point of this.
No.
But if you're going to ask them and say, oh, well, too bad, I'm the boss. Well, you are on the very road to destruction with the relationship with your kids.
Yeah, that's unfortunately what a lot of parents do. They just move ahead anyway. Yeah. But I want to go back to what you said about putting the kids first. The same principle applies that remember, they're not going to be with us forever.
Yeah.
So I, still want to maintain the relationship and the priority of that other person, even though, my kids are priority. Obviously, you don't have kids, or maybe he does. Let's say he doesn't have kids. Mm-hmm. But I do, and you're the stepdad, so I'm going to prioritize them. But then I would be saying, well, that's fine, and I'm going to support you. But remember, they're going to someday leave, and then where are you and I going to be? So as long as that is understood, and I don't feel like I'm being put on the shelf and in the back seat and have no part, because then that's going to make me feel like, why do I want to move forward? So it's an important balance. But listen, Cheryl, what we're talking about is hard stuff. And there are no paint by the numbers, easy answers. Dynamics are crazy. Everybody's different, personality and all these other things. So thank you for, let's just talk it out and do our best to help people, because there are solutions and things can get better. And I've been on both ends of that. Both ends where it was not very good. Today it is. So hopefully we can give some light.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into, I would love to really get into the book. And, there's not going to be any spoiler alerts, but I really want to hear for people to hear, tidbits of what you're going to be talking about, because even the names of the chapters are very intriguing. And I loved how you placed everything. So I want to let's just talk about Chapter 1, what you mean by attachment takes time.
Yeah, that story that I tell in there, it's just typical of one of the things I wanted to address was so many stepchildren end up, in lives of crime or delinquency or drug addiction or whatever. And the statistics and the studies say that a lot of the result is a broken family, that kids end up in those conditions. So I wanted to make that point that if you're, in his case, in that story that I told, the unmatched and unattached, there was nobody in his life, and this is we could talk about it, in general, that was substituting as that caregiver, because his father had taken off and the mother was too busy with work and other kids. And so he just had no attachment. So what clinical psychologists talk about is the secure attachment that happens from the moment a woman is pregnant, even in the womb, which is why we always encourage women to take care of themselves in every way, emotionally, spiritually, physically, because the baby is, I'm not telling you anything, is acclimating all of that. So there's an attachment there. And then Alice Miller and she's a psychologist, world renowned, and you probably know who she is. She's an author. And she talks about how the Western world makes the mistake, used to, I don't think so much anymore, but this secure attachment, once the baby is born, and then the nurses and doctors rush them off right away, to go watch them up and clean them up and weigh them and think all those things that are not really that important at that moment. That moment, that baby needs to be with the mom. And I think we've learned that, better. So that is where that secure attachment starts. It was umbilical cord attachment. Now it's an emotional attachment. Now, from there, it's through their life that you are making sure that it's attachment, emotional stability, security, all of those things. But unfortunately, that's where the studies show that's where the breakdown is. When that doesn't happen, kids don't always turn out so well. A lot of kids overcome it, let's be honest. Yeah. But a lot of kids don't.
Yeah, and we're always saying that if a kid just has one caring adult in their world, it makes all the difference. And, even as teachers or as friends of parents, sometimes we just assume that kids have a caring adult. We just make that assumption. That's right. I would just love it if, teachers would build it into their curriculum, or friends' parents would just say, listen, if your parents are never around, or just open the door, open the door, and they may never walk in, but there could be a day, there could be a time where no one has ever made that offer, so they don't feel like they can.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes, one caring adult to make a huge difference.
That's right. Yeah. That's why, the coaches, the counselors, the priests, the pastors, and extended family in addition to friends and neighbors, they can play a huge role. That's what happened in my life. My mom raised me, single parent in the barrio of Northeast Los Angeles. My dad was an alcoholic and really was not really part of my life, a little bit here and there, but not really.
Mm-hmm.
But it was extended family members and the parents of my friends and coaches that really, made that difference in my life, along with my mother.
Yeah, of course. So let's move along a little bit. Finding your voice. And when I even just read the chapter name, I was like, yes, because where does that fall into a step parenting blended family? Like, I feel like, do step parents, what kind of voice do they have? I mean, should they be the disciplinarian? Should they not be the disciplinarian? Should they be involved in that at all? Should they, when I was in that type of relationship, I was hands off. I wanted nothing to do with it. And I didn't want anything to do with him disciplining my kids. And I got real mama bear when somebody was trying to tell my kid what to do. Well, it's my house. I don't care. It's my, and if you're coming from a blended family, you already have your own parenting styles. Right. And now you're coming into, well, they can never watch TV. They can always watch TV. Well, they don't, so how do we find our voice as a step parent? And how do we allow our step parent, or our spouse who is the step parent, how do we allow them space to be a part of that family?
Yeah, for me, it really, this is why we talk so much in Parents on a Mission about emotional maturity. To me, it just goes back to that. It's so hard, to not react, to learn how to respond to rejection, to whether it's your wife saying, don't just leave my kids alone. I know they're brats, but I don't care. I don't want you. And you're like, where does that leave me, or, or it could be not only the kids, it could be just the mother or the wife is not, treating them in a certain way, and you try to step in and defend them and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't talk to your daughter. Don't tell me how to, know. So that, to me, just, what am I going to do? Do you know who Byron Katie is?
Yeah, doing the work.
So doing the work, that's what it takes. I mean, asking yourself that key question: how do you feel when you think that way about that person? Yeah. And that's, to me, what it comes down to. I'm going to have to go away and just really, number one, do I want this? Because a lot of people say, you know what, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
In my case, I didn't do that. I am in love with my wife. I've been in love with her. I am in love with her. And I always tell people that's a huge factor, because there were a lot of situations like you're talking about that I could have just said, I don't need this. Yeah. I'm out. I have my own kids. I have my own five. She has three. I have my 3 girls and 2 boys. She has three boys. They're giving me a hard time, so to answer that question, I had to do the work. Mm-hmm. And that's really what helped me to just say, okay, I'm going to work this through. And that's in the book. I'm just trying to be very honest about it. Can work out, but it depends on us as the adults to grow and to deal with it.
Yeah, you talk about silence versus secrets. What is that?
I'm sorry, silence.
Silence versus secrets. Is it
silence versus? I think it's domestic violence. Is silence sometimes?
Yes. Yeah.
If you don't talk, so what I meant by that is that if you don't talk about the domestic violence, then you're just keeping it silent, or the secrets, and that didn't help me. I witnessed, as I shared in the book, domestic violence. My dad, and I was a victim of it also. Never talked about it. Nothing was ever said. There was no explanation. There was no apology. There was no acknowledgement. Nothing. Well, as I said, that resentment and that anger and that silence, later on, I became a parent, a step parent, and then a parent. And those resentments got to come out somewhere. And they came out towards my wife at the time and my little kid. They were little kids at the time. So I'm trying to point out in that chapter about we need to heal ourselves by talking about and acknowledging some of these traumatic events and experiences that we had in our life. And even if the person it doesn't have to be a conversation with that person.
Yeah.
But just the conversation of acknowledging, hey, I'm hurt, and hurting people hurt people. Yeah. And that's what was happening in my life. And the silence doesn't resolve it.
No, and I think too, in situations where there could be not even physical violence, but domestic violence,
right?
Coercive violence. And right. when it's happening and kids are young and mom decides or dad decides, I'm not gender-based, to leave, thinking the kids are too young to have absorbed any of that. Mm-hmm. And they don't. It sits there. So it's something for, the leaving parent to really be aware of. Yep. I feel like there's so much work to do there because we just don't understand that they're too young to understand. They're not, just like the umbilical cord, just like the attachment styles. Just right. Because they're not 15 or 16 and fighting back doesn't mean they don't understand what's happening there. And I think a really good way to figure out if you have some trauma from growing up is when you are parenting. That's and right. Something triggers you. And instead of the backlash, instead of, the reaction to your kid, we talk about a lot about this and during other podcasts, is like, why is this triggering me? Like there's something here.
That's right.
And something you need to look at, because it shouldn't be because your kid threw the socks on the floor that you're losing your mind, or somebody's talking back to you or has not listened to you. Do you know what I'm saying? I feel like that is...
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Murray Bowen in his family systems theory, he talks about one of the best ways you can grow as an adult and as a parent is to understand your family of origin, and to look at the genogram of your family of origin, and even going back to, your parents' parents. Yeah. And for example, my mother was not affectionate, and I didn't know how to be affectionate originally as a father, but she told me a story about her parents were not affectionate. So just things like that, when you understand the family origin your origin of family that you came from, the dynamics and the siblings and the relationship or non-relationship with your parents, and then their relationship, all of that, he calls it the family system. That is what's defining all of us. We're not individuals that aren't affected by that system.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing. Like you said, you got to think about, why am I triggered? What would trigger me, Cheryl, was when my kids would cry, and I would get angry. I'd get mad. Like, their kids are crying, but I would get angry. Like, what are you crying? Be quiet. Shut up. And, I was 20 something years old, and after a while, I couldn't understand it. Why am I so angry about a little kid crying?
Yeah.
But that was one of the triggers. And, the dead man was controlling my life.
Yeah.
My dad, because he had died when I was 18. So I finally realized all that resentment and anger and bitterness and unforgiveness was towards him. And once I took care of that, I became a different father, different man, different husband.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because, well, not funny, but it's, as I was growing up, I was very much, wasn't to have an opinion or a reason for something. Mm-hmm. It was what it was. And any kind of dispute was talking back, and it was not tolerated. And, later on, much later, I start realizing, this is why I don't stand up for myself or speak up for myself or whatever. And then you go back to where it came from. But then I kind of went back a few more steps. Well, how was she raised? And what kind of, and it's almost very forgiving. And not that I was angry. Every parent does the best they can, at the best they're able to do. But, when you go back and say, okay, but it doesn't stop there. Didn't stop with your dad. Your dad probably had his own history and his own history. And
Right.
sometimes we don't get the opportunity to, get into that situation to resolve it face to face. But there are ways. There are writing letters. There are, and
Right.
just burning them. There are different methods to do it. And I totally believe in that. I and obviously you do too, because you have grown from it. But to hold on to it is you have to stop the lineage. You have to be the one to stop it.
Yeah, that's right. That's why Nelson Mandela said, revenge is like drinking poison and hoping it'll kill your enemies.
Yeah, I've heard that. Like that's so important. So I want to talk about grief and new beginnings. So what would be a difference between a blended family from a spouse who has passed? So now you're a widow or widower bringing your children into a blended family, as opposed to having an ex-spouse. Like, what would the dynamics be that are different? And do you have a way of kind of helping somebody through that might be a difference?
Well, I think that the obvious difference is people are a little bit more accepting, not completely, especially the kids, but they're a little bit more accepting of you moving on because, your spouse has passed. So they're no longer here. But I shared in the book that one of my friends, his wife had passed, years ago, and he decided after a year, maybe 2 years, I think it was 2 years, to start dating, and his kids were adults and they weren't having any part of it. As far as I know, to this day, they still don't accept it. So that happens too. But for the most part, I think most people, especially if you maintain, this is the key, really, I think, if you maintain a good relationship with your children or child or whatever it is, and the mother or the father has passed, that's going to be the key, because as they grow, they're going to want you to be happy. I think maybe when they're young, maybe not, because they're just too young, but as they get older. So I think that's another difference there, is if your children are a little bit older, they want you to be happy, not lonely, as they grow. So those are a couple of different things, but I think the main thing about it is, the acceptance of other people it's not the bottom line, but you want people to want you to be happy.
Yes.
And especially your children.
Yeah.
But even when the spouse is gone, it's not guaranteed. So what that person has to do is you have to make up your mind. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to have a life, and you may need to make that decision regardless of what others, how they judge you. And we already talked about it. It's hard though when it's your kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking about, so for the parent who is in it, you're in it. You decided to go for it, and you thought it was a good idea, and everybody seemed to be pretty agreeable. And now you've got 5 kids, 3 kids blending together. Everybody's fighting. Nobody's getting along. Sibling rivalry, and then step sibling rivalry. And talk about that first. Like, how do you manage that? With your blended family, you must have siblings that are not getting along, or step siblings that are not getting along at some point. How is that managed?
Yeah, well, same thing. You don't want what you don't want. You don't want your kids feeling like they're favoring their kids, her kids, or I'm going to say her kids.
Yeah.
You don't want that. That's a disaster.
Yeah.
When if they to win be the new dad, you're favoring them, going out of your way and being this loving, kind servant person, but to your own kids, you're all, I don't have time. You take care of that kind of thing. So that's you don't want to do that. But other than that, it's really being able to maintain. Again, it goes back to my maturity. I got to maintain this caring, good relationship that I have with my kids,
Yeah.
But I also have to be fair and treat her kids the same way. And that isn't always easy because sometimes they're giving me a bad time. My kids are not giving me a bad time. Her kids are giving me a bad time. Now I can't, my kids didn't give her as bad a time, but they gave her a bad time. So it was different for her. So, but what's the answer? But it's that triangle situation, you can't get pulled by one, I can't allow my kids to pull me into a triangle of here's my wife, here's them, and now they're pulling me into the triangle and it caused me to take sides with them, and that causes problems between me and her. But what you have to do in the triangle, you have to maintain relationship with both parties and not take responsibility for their relationship. I'm not going to take responsibility.
That's good.
For my daughter's inability to get along with their new stepmom. I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do, I'm going to maintain my relationship with my wife, maintain with them, and then they're just going to have to work it out. I'm not going to get in the middle of that. That's what's the triangle that I talk about in one of the chapters. So that's another thing to be aware of. But ultimately, it really just comes down to can I maintain my relationship with all sides? So my kids, her kids, and she has to be able to do the same thing. And you can imagine that's a lot of work. It's great. It's great. And one more thing, Cheryl.
Yeah.
I'll just use my wife and I. You still have to maintain your romance in the middle of all that.
On top of all this.
On top of all that. Because otherwise, what do you have? You know what I mean? I mean, you got to get away. You got to take a break. You got to go on vacation or go away for the weekend. You got to do something, because if you don't, and it almost happened to us a few times over these 23 years, there's been some times where we thought, you know what, I'm done. This is over, man. I don't want to. Or she was saying the same thing. It's like, you know what, this isn't working. It's too much for the kids. All of that. Yeah. Then they start pointing fingers. Well, your kids, and well, no, it's your kids. But what I'm saying is that all happens. But if there's that mutual, no, you know what, I really do love you. I don't want this. You come to that, like, do I really want to start all over again?
With another freaking blended thing.
Yeah. So, it's I just hope all of your audience, I just hope this is all making sense, because we're just being candid. I'm being very candid, but at the same time, I wrote the book because I wanted to give people hope. There is hope. Yeah. There are no easy answers. There's no quick fixes. But if we're willing to do the work, that's the hope.
You dropped something that's just sitting with me, is that I'm not taking responsibility for their relationship. I think that's like the shining star right now. Like, that is so, and that's got to take some work. Like, it does. Oh my gosh, I feel that. Yeah.
You got to keep your mouth quiet.
Wow. That's really good. Like, that is a number one thing. And I would never have worded it like that, but that's exactly right. I'm not taking responsibility for your relationship. And that's, so good. Richard, I know we can't dive into the whole book, and people need to read this book, get the book. The link is going to be in the show notes. Is there something I didn't ask? Is there something you really wanted to say about this book, or something that I just missed that you want to share before we go?
I don't think so, Cheryl. There is so much, like you said. I think what we've talked about, I hope, has been insightful, real, honest, and hopeful. And I think at the end of the day, what I would say is that there's hope. There really is hope. And read the book. Our family is doing well, and I'm honest about we still have once in a while issues, but we are way past where we were, and that is because of my wife and I really being willing to do the work on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So much value in this, Richard. I'm so appreciative of you coming back again. And I just want to thank everyone for listening. I'm quite sure you can hear through the conversation there is hope, but we've all been through it, some worse than others, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's called The Art of Step Parenting. So get the book. Thank you again, Richard. Thank you for listening to Parenting Teens Advice Redefined, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode. I hope you loved this one as much as I did. And I just wanted to share something with you because, parenting teens is not just about managing these challenges that we talk about on all the episodes. It's also about evolving alongside them. And I'm Cheryl, and not only the host of this podcast, but I'm also the creator of Insight to Impact coaching and consulting. And I help you, moms of teens, reconnect with your true selves so you can lead with purpose. You can parent with clarity. You can create stronger, more meaningful relationships with your kids. Because here's the truth. The transformation starts with you. Together, we will break free from the stress and overwhelm. We will rediscover your power. We will create the life and the family dynamic you always dreamed of. If you're ready to start this journey, let's do it. You might just not recognize your life in the next 90 days. It all starts with a call. There's no pitch. There's no pressure. Just a call to see if I can help. We'll talk about your goals. We'll talk about what's making you feel stuck and what might be getting in your way. And everything you need to connect with me is in the show notes. Again, I'm Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me here on Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for Today's Complex World, and the creator of Insight to Impact Coaching and Consulting. Have a great day.